In a remarkable turn of events, the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction nominated a record number of Canadian women writers this year. One of those writers is Catherin Leroux, whose book, The Future, paints an alternate history where Detroit was never surrendered to the U.S., performing a visceral autopsy on the Motor City, where Gloria, the protagonist of the story, goes in search of her missing granddaughters. Leroux paints a world that takes a page from the absurdist evocations of authors like Julio Cortázar. As Gloria steps into the realm of abandoned children, she finds an inner strength she didn't know she had. The Future is a book that shines a glimmering light of hope as we stare into a dystopian world as a species. Integral to the success of this story is the translation by Calgary-based author and translator Susan Ouriou. And I was fortunate enough to catch up with Susan Ouriou at her home in Calgary. I'm honored to have an opportunity to speak with you, translator of this remarkable book, which already claimed Canada Reads and is now up for this Carol Shields Prize for Fiction. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
That is no small feat, and deservedly. This is a remarkable story. Can you tell me, first of all, how you got involved in translating The Future?
Well, Catherin Leroux, who wrote The Future, had two other books, I think, translated by another translator who was retiring from translating from French. And so when Biblioasis decided to have L'Avenir translated, she asked if they could ask me, because she had read my translation of a friend of hers book. And so I was thrilled to accept when I was asked to translate it.
And so had you read the book when you were asked to translate it?
No, I hadn't. So I always do ask to see the book before I confirm, but I love the book the minute I read it, so that was not a problem.
Okay. You jumped ahead. My next question was, what did you think when you read the book, presumably in French?
I love how she's created another history. She's created another world with her children. These children run wild, living in a park in Fort Detroit, because Detroit is no longer an American city, but is a Canadian city where the main language is French. So she was able to rewrite history and reimagine the future in a way.
And that's the premise of the book, which is so remarkably beautifully translated. There's a whimsy to the writing, incisive character development, and a wry wit at work here. On occasion, it contrasts with the subject matter in a bittersweet way, but you captured a lot of the nuance in translation. Now, translation is not just literally translating word for word. You have to create the spirit of the literature in your translation. How did you do that with this book?
Well, I love your description of it. And of course, all those elements were in the original. So because I appreciated it so much in the original, I wanted to be sure that a reader in English could feel that whimsy, feel the beauty of the language, feel that fear at times that came across in the original. And so that's the way I translate, is I translate the same notions and images and emotions that I, as a reader, get from the original. So it's not at all a word-to-word translation.
I was wondering, Susan, whether we could have you just read a tiny little sample of your handiwork, because it is so incredibly descriptive and uses a huge palette of colors.
Okay, I just quickly chose one from the ravine where the children live, just because I love those children so much. And they all have very inventive names. So Wolf Pup is to go and check on the sentries, because the children make sure that no adults can come into what is their domain. So without a sound, Wolf Pup heads for the camp's periphery. That is her great talent, the ability to move silently, to remove herself from the kingdom of the audible, something learned very early in her life, in a world that now weighs no more than the crater left by a bomb in her memory. The first two she comes across are method and terror. As always, their eyes are peeled, no chatting, no nodding off for them, as stiff and mute as javelins. Yatim and Pretty are another story. The former has one hand jammed deep in his armpit and is flapping his arm up and down like a one-winged hen, while Pretty doubles up in laughter at every eruption created by her partner's antics. A fireball could be racing toward the pair, and they wouldn't see a thing. A predatory smile on her lips, Wolf Pup kneels, takes aim, pumps her weapon to the max, then pulls the trigger. Two screams resound. Wolf Pup snickers soundlessly. Her victims, their backs soaked in a wet bullseye, turn round.
Wow, Susan, thank you so much for that and for painting such evocative images with this book. It's just a wonderful read. I couldn't put it down. That's a cliche, but it's absolutely true. I couldn't put it down. And I wish you every bit of luck going into the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction. The shortlist comes out in April, and my fingers are crossed for you both.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you love this book. And as I say, as you mentioned, it does have a dystopian element, but it also has a bit of magic realism. And in my case, what really struck me is the hope.
And I'm so glad you're part of it, Susan. Thank you, Susan.
Okay, thank you, Tony.
The book The Future is published by Biblioasis and is available at your favorite bookstore. Translated by Susan Ouriou, written by Catherin Leroux. It's a remarkable book, and not only did it claim the Canada Reads Prize for 2024, but it's also up for the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction. The short list of 5 authors will be announced April 9th. Thanks to Susan Ouriou for having a chat with me this afternoon.